Under the harsh noon sun, a blindfolded Apache girl stood trembling in the dirt, her wrists raw from rope, auctioned by the man who should have protected her. When the lonely cowboy handed over his last coins and took her hand, the townsfolk whispered about mercy, about madness. But as he led her away, her head tilted, eyes covered but gaze unshakable, he caught a glimmer of knowing beneath her silence. In that moment, he realized there was more to what she saw than anyone could imagine. The dust never truly settled in White Butte, New Mexico. It clung to boots and skin, to memories and regrets, swirling between the rough wooden storefronts and the empty-eyed men who passed their days waiting for something to change. On the outskirts of the town, at the edge of the dry arroyo, an auction block had been dragged out for the second time that month, this time not for cattle, but for a child. Samuel Clay had ridden into White Butte with nothing but a battered hat, a tired gelding, and the ache of too many silent winters spent alone. The world had made him hard, but not cruel. He avoided the gatherings in town, but that day the rumors reached him before he'd reached the water trough. The old Apache's selling his own girl. Says she's blind, can't work, just a burden. When Sam arrived, the small crowd parted, more out of discomfort than respect. On the splintered platform stood a girl, no more than 15, her skin marked by sun and neglect, her black hair matted beneath a strip of faded cloth tied over her eyes. Beside her, a grizzled man with whiskey breath barked out her faults, waving a battered cane and cursing in English and Apache alike. She can't see a thing, worthless to me, eats more than she earns, but she's strong and she's quiet. Take her off my hands and you'll have no trouble. There was no starting bid, only silence and averted eyes. The girl stood motionless, hands bound, feet bare, the bones at her wrists jutting sharp. Yet something in her stillness unsettled Sam. An uprightness, a refusal to bend, even with the sun burning down and her father's voice thick with shame. Sam reached into his pocket, counting out the few coins he'd earned from his last job. "I'll take her," he said, voice low but steady. The old man snatched the coins, spat into the dust, and released the rope. For a moment, the girl remained rooted to the spot. Then, as Sam gently touched her shoulder, she turned her head toward him, not quite facing, but not missing either. In the shadow beneath her blindfold, he saw the faintest twitch of a smile, as if she knew him before he'd spoken. As they walked away, the murmurs faded, but the weight of what he'd done pressed harder with every step. Sam had rescued her from one kind of darkness, but what sort of light awaited them? Neither could yet imagine. Samuel Clay guided the girl carefully through the town's edge, his hand gentle yet awkward at her elbow. The auction crowd quickly scattered, returning to their business as if nothing had happened, but Sam could feel their stares pressing into his back like a warning. He'd never bought a person before. In truth, he hated what he'd just done, but he hated leaving her to that man's mercy even more. He walked slowly, letting her match his pace, uncertain if she could sense the uneven ground beneath her feet or the eyes that lingered on their passage. For a long stretch, the only sounds were the creak of leather and the hush of wind through brittle sage. The girl said nothing. She did not stumble, though Sam expected her to. Her head remained slightly raised, blindfold tight, but her chin held proud. He studied her face, looking for a trace of fear, but instead found something unreadable, cautious perhaps, but not lost. He led her behind the livery stable, where his horse waited with the supplies he'd packed that morning. "I'm going to untie your hands," he murmured, kneeling beside her. "You're safe now, I promise." His voice sounded strange, rougher than usual, and he cursed himself for not knowing what words might offer comfort. Gently, he worked at the knot, wincing at the deep marks the rope had left on her wrists. She neither flinched nor protested, holding her hands out to him with a composure far beyond her years. As soon as the last strand loosened, the girl flexed her fingers, rubbing at the raw skin. She did not remove the blindfold. Sam hesitated, then reached for his canteen. "Thirsty?" She nodded once, small and quick. He pressed the metal rim to her lips, watching as she drank slowly, no drops spilled. "What's your name?" Sam asked quietly. She was silent for a long time, as if measuring him. Then, softly, she replied, Naira. The sound of it surprised him, not just the name but the certainty in her tone. I'm Sam Samuel Clay. You can call me Sam if you like. The girl nodded again, and for the first time, Sam saw her mouth twitch at the corner, just the ghost of a smile. He rummaged through his saddlebag and pulled out a small cloth, dabbing it in water. May I clean your wrists? He asked. She extended her arms, palms up. He worked in silence, careful and precise, wincing at every wince she failed to show. The wounds were ugly but not deep. You'll heal, he murmured. Might scar, but you'll heal. Naira listened, unmoving. When he finished, she reached up and tightened the blindfold herself, knotting it with sure, practiced fingers. The gesture caught Sam off guard. How easily she managed without sight, how little she faltered. Sam patted the horse's neck, preparing for the ride home. We've a few miles to go, he said. I'll help you up and you ride with me. You all right with that? She did not answer, but placed her hand on the horse's flank, running her palm down its side, feeling the muscle and warmth. Sam swung into the saddle, then gently lifted her up, settling her in front of him. Her posture remained straight, unafraid, as if she'd done this many times. The road back to Sam's ranch wound through hills marked by burnt grass and scattered mesquite. As they rode, Naira's head tilted from side to side, sometimes toward the calls of distant birds or the crunch of hooves on gravel. She did not ask where they were going, nor did she seem lost. Her silence grew heavy, filling the space between them with questions Sam could not form aloud. He tried to distract her, to lighten the weight that hung in the air. You hungry? I've got bread and jerky in my pack. She shook her head. Not now, she said, her voice soft but steady. They rode until the sun dipped low, throwing long shadows across the parched earth. Sam's ranch was small, a weathered house, a collapsed fence line, and a single corral where his old mule wandered. He helped Naira down, guiding her inside. The place smelled of dust and coffee, the hearth cold from neglect. Sit here, Sam said, pulling out a chair near the table. She found the edge without help, tracing her fingers along the worn wood before settling down. Sam stoked the fire, putting water to boil. He searched for words, but all that came were apologies he couldn't say. Instead, he handed her a tin cup, hot and sweet with a pinch of sugar he'd been saving for months. Naira cradled it carefully, inhaling the scent. Thank you, she whispered. He watched her, noticing again how little she hesitated, how she moved with uncanny precision for someone blind. She turned her face toward the flicker of the fire, listening to its crackle. Did your father, was he always like that? Sam finally asked. A pause. Then, quietly, he used to be kind before the drink, before the debts. Sam nodded, not pressing further. The sun fell behind the hills, painting the sky with fire. Inside the little house, two strangers sat in quiet, each nursing their own wounds, each unsure of what the next day might bring. Yet as the darkness deepened, Sam caught a strange comfort in Naira's calm. She did not cry, did not beg, did not even sigh. She simply sat, unbowed, as if waiting for the world to show her something only she could see. The next morning, sunlight crept softly across the warped floorboards of Sam's ranch house. He woke to the sound of footsteps, light, deliberate, moving in the next room. For a brief second, he thought he'd dreamed the girl, that the rescue and the silent journey home were tricks of a lonely mind. But then he saw Naira, standing by the window, hands searching for the edge of the glass, her face angled toward the pale warmth filtering through the cracked pane. Sam sat up quietly, not wanting to startle her. She seemed so attuned to her surroundings, listening to the rooster's call, the distant bark of his old mule, the shiver of wind through the cottonwoods outside. He watched as she touched the wall, finding a nail where he once hung his coat, her fingertips dancing over the ridges of the wood, mapping a space she could not see, or so he thought. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked gently. She turned, facing him perfectly despite the blindfold. "Enough," she replied. The bed was soft. It's quieter here than in the town. Sam rose, pulling on his boots, feeling the familiar stiffness in his joints. He busied himself with breakfast, cracking eggs into a battered skillet, the sizzle and scent filling the small kitchen. Naira listened, head tilted, breathing in deeply. He set a plate near her. I made eggs and some bread. Nothing fancy. She found the fork on her own, testing the shape of the plate's edge, eating slowly and methodically. Sam watched, half out of concern, half out of awe at her self-reliance. She rarely missed her mouth, never asked for help. The only sign of uncertainty was the way she paused sometimes, as if checking for something hidden in the air. When they finished, Sam sat across from her, hands folded. He wanted to ask about her blindness, how long, how deep, but he hesitated. Instead, he tried for a softer question. Do you remember your mother? Naira was silent for a long moment, tracing a line in the crumbs with her finger. A little. She sang to me when I was small. She left before I lost my sight. Sam nodded, unsure what to say. He sensed she wasn't just recounting facts. Her words were weighed, chosen with care. How long? He hesitated, searching for gentleness. How long since you stopped seeing? She smiled faintly. Since I was 9. Fever took my sight. Her hand drifted to her face, touching the blindfold. At least, that's what the healer said. Sam reached for his coffee, trying to hide his sadness. You get by better than most. If I didn't know, I'd never guess. Naira lifted her chin, almost amused. People look at me and see nothing but darkness. But there are other ways to know a place. A step, a sound, the way air moves. He grinned despite himself. So, you're telling me you see more than I do? Her smile grew, gentle but sure. Maybe I see differently, that's all. Sam leaned back, considering her words. He thought of all the things he'd missed in life, signs from people he'd loved, warnings he'd ignored, simple beauties he'd hurried past. He wondered how much of his own blindness had nothing to do with eyes. They spent the day working in quiet companionship. Sam showed her the edges of the house, warning of the stove's heat, the crooked step at the door. Naira listened, nodding, committing each detail to memory. By midday, she could walk from the kitchen to the well behind the house with barely a stumble. Once, as Sam was tending the mule, he heard her humming softly to herself, the melody foreign yet familiar, weaving through the stillness like water. In the afternoon, Sam needed to mend a section of the fence. He hesitated to leave her alone but found no better solution. I'll be just out back, he called. If you need anything, just shout. Naira nodded, sitting by the open window. Sam watched her from the yard, half expecting her to freeze or falter in the new space. Instead, she sat poised, listening, head cocked as if catching distant secrets on the wind. He returned an hour later to find her standing in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame, the other holding a small carved figure he'd left on the mantel, a horse he'd whittled years ago. She turned it in her hands, fingers tracing the grooves, a faint smile on her lips. I like this, she said softly. Sam was startled. Most folks don't even notice it. Naira shrugged. It's meant to be held, not just seen. Some things tell their story in the dark. He felt the truth of her words settle over him, heavy and bright. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of all the things they didn't yet know about each other, of grief and hope, of the possibility that life could start again even here. That night, as the wind rose and the desert's chill crept into the corners of the old house, Sam set an extra blanket at the foot of Naira's bed. Might get cold, he said. She pulled it up without protest, but before she lay down, she faced him once more. Thank you for taking me in, Sam. He looked away, embarrassed by the gratitude he felt he didn't deserve. You're safe here, Naira. You'll always have a place. As he blew out the lamp, Sam realized he hadn't felt this kind of peace in years. But outside, somewhere beyond the thin walls and the new beginnings, he couldn't shake the sense that trouble was still watching. And he wondered, if Naira truly saw what others could not, would she sense it coming before he did? The following day dawned with a brittle chill, the kind that made Sam's joints ache before he'd even swung his legs out of bed. He moved quietly, letting Naira rest a little longer. But when he stepped into the kitchen, he found her already there, sitting at the table, blindfold in place, fingers brushing gently over the surface as if reading the patterns in the grain. She turned toward him before he spoke, her awareness uncanny. "It's colder today," she said. Sam smiled, lighting the stove. "You feel it in the air?" She nodded. "And the way the house creaks more, the winds from the north." Impressed, Sam busied himself with breakfast. They ate together, sharing simple talk about the day's plans. He told her about the stubborn mule, the fence that still leaned like an old man after too much whiskey, the hope that rain would come soon. Naira listened, asking quiet questions, each one thoughtful, never wasting words. It was only after breakfast that the first sign of trouble arrived. Sam heard it before he saw it, the crunch of wagon wheels in the distance, the low voices of men drifting on the wind. He peered through the wavy glass of the front window and saw two riders and a covered cart moving slowly up the road toward his property, a rare sight and rarely a good omen. His stomach tightened. He moved to the door, opening it just wide enough to watch but not be seen. The men drew closer, dust curling up around their horses' legs. One wore a badge pinned to his vest, the other a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. In the back of the cart, Sam glimpsed the outline of a figure slumped against the boards, a man old and hunched, with a bottle clutched in his hand. Naira's father. The riders pulled up in front of the house. The one with the badge, a deputy, Sam guessed, called out. "Morning, anyone home?" Sam stepped outside, shutting the door softly behind him. "Morning. Can I help you, gentlemen?" The deputy dismounted, boots thudding in the dust. Name's Grant. Sheriff's office. "We're looking for a girl. Apache, blind maybe. She was sold here a few days back by her father. Man claims he made a mistake. Wants her back." The words hit Sam like a hammer. He kept his face neutral. "That girl's here. She's under my protection. Her father sold her, took my money, and I took her in, that's the truth." Behind Grant, the other rider kept a hand near his belt, eyes wary. In the cart, Naira's father groaned, barely conscious, his face mottled with drink and shame. Grant studied Sam, his gaze sharp. "We've had complaints from town. Folks saying you bought a child. That's not exactly legal, friend. Her father's willing to pay you back. Sheriff says we ought to take her to the mission, let them decide." Sam felt a deep, slow anger rising. He forced himself to stay calm. "She's safer here than with him, and safer here than the mission. She's not a stray dog, deputy. She's a person." The deputy looked past Sam at the little house, suspicion darkening his face. "Let me speak to her." Sam hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." He stepped back inside, closing the door behind him. Naira stood just beyond the threshold, hands clasped, her body tense. "Who is it?" she whispered. "Deputy and another man. Your father's with them. Says he wants you back. Says the law's involved." For the first time, Sam saw fear in her posture, a tightening around her shoulders, but she lifted her head, steady and composed. "What will you do?" "I'll stand with you, Naira, but it's your choice. If you want to speak, I'll be right by your side." She nodded once, a decision made. "Let them come in." Sam opened the door, allowing the deputy inside while the second man stayed at the threshold. Grant entered, hat in hand, glancing around the simple room. "Naira?" he asked gently. She faced him, blindfolded but unafraid. "I hear you, deputy." He shifted uncomfortably. "Your father says he made a mistake. He wants you to come back with him or go to the mission. Says he can't manage alone." She was silent for a long moment. Then, voice steady, "My father sold me. I do not wish to return to him. I want to stay here." The deputy looked at Sam, then at the girl. "Why here? He's not your family." Naira's answer was quiet but firm. "Because Sam sees me. Not my blindness, not my shame. He sees me." Grant frowned, not understanding. But Sam did, and the truth of it rang through the room like a bell. After a tense silence, Grant shrugged. "I'll report it to the sheriff. The law will have to decide." He left, the door closing behind him with a final, uncertain thud. Sam turned to Naira, heart pounding. "You spoke for yourself, Naira. That took courage." She smiled for real this time, small and shining. It was time someone saw the truth. But as the cart rattled away and the dust settled, Sam knew this was just the beginning. The law, the town, her father, None of them would let go so easily. He could only hope he'd be strong enough to protect the girl who, blindfolded, somehow saw everything that truly mattered. After the deputy and her father left, a tense quiet filled the little house. Sam watched the road until the dust faded, every muscle taut with a worry he couldn't shake. Naira, meanwhile, sat quietly at the table, her face unreadable beneath the blindfold. But her stillness wasn't that of fear or defeat. It was a kind of calm, almost as if she'd expected this moment all along. Sam pulled out a chair, sinking into it with a heavy sigh. "They'll be back," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Town's always got something to say about what it doesn't understand." Naira's lips quirked upward, just barely. "They do not have to understand," she replied softly. "They just have to let us live." Her certainty surprised him, but there was an edge in her voice, a quiet defiance he hadn't noticed before. He realized then how much strength she'd been carrying, hidden beneath her silence and careful steps. She was not just surviving, she was choosing how to meet each challenge, her own way. Through the afternoon, Sam kept busy, fixing a loose hinge on the barn door and stacking firewood, always glancing back to the house, expecting the deputy's return or the shadow of Naira's father at the fence. Inside, Naira moved around the small space with growing confidence. He'd find her standing by the window, feeling for the sun's warmth, or sitting with the wooden horse in her hands, fingers tracing its smooth lines. At one point, she came to the door and called out, "Sam, is it all right if I step outside?" He nodded, then remembered himself. "Of course. Let me show you where the garden is. There's a fence, but some parts are broken." Naira stepped carefully down the single wooden stair, her hand reaching out until she found the rail. Sam walked beside her, guiding her hand along the fence post. "Right here. There's soft earth, a few wildflowers. Careful, the old well's to the left." She knelt and pressed her fingers into the earth, smiling faintly. "I used to help my mother in her garden. She said the soil remembers every kindness you give it." Sam listened, surprised by the calm in her voice. "You miss her?" Naira nodded. "I do, but I remember her in things like this, not in sorrow." For a moment, they simply shared the late afternoon sun and the sound of distant birds. Then, a sudden noise shattered the peace, a sharp, angry shout carried on the wind. Sam turned, heart in his throat, but it was only the mule balking at a snake in the grass. Still, the tension lingered, a warning that danger could come from anywhere, at any time. As dusk settled, they retreated inside. Sam made a pot of beans and sliced the last of his bread, serving it with care. Naira ate quietly, every movement graceful. When she finished, she stood and began clearing the table, rinsing each dish as if she'd done it 100 times before. "Can I ask you something?" Sam said after a long pause. Naira turned, drying her hands on a towel. "Of course. Back there with the deputy, you didn't hesitate. How did you know what to say?" She considered, then answered, "I listened, not just to words, but to how people move, how they breathe. My father's heart. He was not coming for me. He was coming for himself. The deputy, too, he wanted to do right, but was afraid to choose. You waited, but you did not hide. That's what I needed." Sam felt something shift inside him, a warmth and a sting all at once. "You see more than I ever could, Naira." She stepped closer, reaching out, finding his arm with careful fingers. "Maybe you just needed to be seen too, Sam." For a moment, the world narrowed to the small kitchen, the hush of evening, and the simple, profound connection growing between them, something raw, honest, and fragile. As the night deepened, Naira prepared for bed, pulling the blanket to her chin. Before Sam blew out the lamp, she whispered, "Thank you for listening, for not looking away." He sat in the dark long after her breathing slowed, replaying her words, the gentle conviction behind them. Outside, a lone coyote called, the sound sharp and haunting against the empty sky. But beneath that wildness, within the walls of the little house, a quiet strength was beginning to take root, a faith that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward neither of them could yet see. Yet as sleep pulled him under, Sam could not shake the feeling that someone, or something was still watching from the darkness beyond the window. Trouble had a way of returning to these parts, especially when the law left questions unanswered. Would their fragile peace last another day? The next morning broke heavy with clouds, the kind that made every sound sharper and every shadow longer. Sam woke early, nerves prickling. He stepped onto the porch, mug in hand, and scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of riders on the old trail or dust kicked up by wagons from town. The air was thick with tension, as if the earth itself were holding its breath. Inside, Naira moved quietly, preparing tea and bread. She greeted Sam with a small, steady smile, but he saw the worry flicker across her face. He tried to keep things normal, discussing the chores for the day. The mule needed shoeing. The fence near the creek had collapsed, but they both knew it was just an effort to keep their minds from circling the uncertainty that now hovered over them. Late that morning, as Sam worked at the edge of the property, he spotted a figure approaching on foot, emerging from the thicket near the creek. It was old Boone, a rancher from farther up the valley, a man with a crumpled hat and a limp that grew worse each year. Boone was known for his loose tongue and sharper memory. Sam wiped his hands on his trousers and went to meet him halfway. Boone nodded, his gaze drifting toward the house. "Heard you got yourself a new hand," he drawled, voice dry as straw. Sam kept his tone neutral. "Just lending a place to someone in need, Boone." Boone spat into the dirt. "Town's talking, Sam. Deputy says the girl's father is raising a stink. Wants you charged for kidnapping. Sheriff's headed out this way soon. Might not be alone." Sam felt a cold fist wrap around his heart. "She's safer here. You know how it is." Boone studied him for a moment, then looked away. "I ain't judging, but folks don't like what they don't understand. Best be ready." The old man shuffled off, and Sam stood for a long time in the grey light, replaying the warning. When he returned to the house, he found Naira standing by the window, listening to the muted conversation that had floated through the thin walls. "They're coming, aren't they?" she asked quietly. He nodded, then realized she couldn't see it. "Yes, the sheriff, maybe others." Naira seemed unsurprised. She folded her hands in front of her, standing tall. "I won't go back, Sam." "You don't have to," he said, though his voice was taut with fear. "Not while I can help it." They spent the afternoon in uneasy preparation. Sam sharpened his old rifle, checked the locks on the doors, and stacked wood against the side of the house, partly for warmth, partly for a makeshift barricade if it came to it. Naira helped where she could, gathering food, packing a small satchel with bread, jerky, and a canteen. There was no panic in her movements, only resolve. As dusk crept in, they sat together at the table, a lantern casting golden light across their faces. Sam reached for Naira's hand, surprised at his own boldness. She let him, her fingers steady in his palm. "If they come and things go bad, I want you to hide," he said softly. "Behind the cellar door. Wait for me to fetch you." She squeezed his hand, shaking her head. "No, Sam, I won't hide while you stand alone. I've hidden enough for a lifetime." He couldn't argue, not really, so they sat in silence, the storm outside finally breaking with a hard rain that hammered the roof and swept the yard clean. The sound was almost comforting, a wall of water between them and whatever approached. Much later, just as Sam was drifting to sleep, a gentle touch roused him. Naira stood by his bed, her blindfold still in place, hair loose over her shoulders. "I heard something," she whispered. "Outside. 2 horses, moving slow." Sam's blood ran cold. He grabbed his rifle and crept to the window, peering into the blackness. Lightning flickered, illuminating 2 shapes at the far edge of the yard. Riders, waiting. He motioned for Naira to stay back, but she moved to his side, unafraid. "Do you trust me?" she asked. He nodded, surprised at how easy the answer came. "Yes, Naira." "I do." She turned her head toward the storm, listening with an intensity Sam couldn't fathom. "They're waiting for the rain to slow. They'll come when they think we're sleeping." "How do you know?" She smiled, a strange confidence in her voice. "I can hear their whispers, the way the ground shakes under their boots. People forget that the dark belongs to more than just the blind." Sam shivered. In that moment, he realized she wasn't just surviving. She was reading the world in ways he never could. The girl he thought needed saving was, in her own way, protecting him. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, and the storm raged on. But inside, a fragile alliance formed, born of fear, yes, but also of faith. Sam tightened his grip on the rifle, glancing at Naira as she stood tall beside him, unflinching. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. And as the next bolt of lightning split the sky, Sam wondered, what else did Naira see in the darkness that everyone else was blind to? The hours dragged deep into the night, each minute measured by the ticking of rain against the windows and the restless wind rattling the roof. Sam and Naira barely spoke. He kept the lantern turned low, his rifle laid across his knees as he sat facing the door. Naira remained at his side, calm, her head slightly turned as if she was listening to something only she could hear. From time to time, Sam's nerves threatened to unravel. He was used to danger, cattle thieves, wild coyotes, even desperate men. But this was different. He was no longer protecting just his own skin. The girl beside him, who had arrived as a burden forced upon him by fate, now felt like a reason to stand his ground, whatever came. Shortly after midnight, the rain slackened. The hush that followed made the world outside seem sharper, every sound amplified. Naira sat forward, breath shallow, one hand clutching the carved wooden horse. "They're moving," she whispered. "One by the barn, one at the well." Sam strained his ears, but heard nothing, just wind and the last drops of rain dripping from the eaves. Still, he trusted her. He checked the window. Shadows shifted near the barn, a flash of movement too heavy for any animal. He took a steadying breath, forced calm into his hands. A voice cut through the darkness, low and hard. "Clay, we know you're in there. Step out and we'll talk. Nobody needs to get hurt." Sam gritted his teeth, trying to see past the glass. "Who's there?" he called, his voice steady. A pause. Then, "Sheriff's orders. Sam, the girl needs to come with us." "Don't make this harder." Sam kept his voice level. "She's not going anywhere unless she wants to, and she doesn't." A second figure appeared at the edge of the lantern's glow, rifle slung, hat pulled low. "We don't want trouble, Clay. Hand her over." Naira's hand found Sam's arm. "Let me speak," she said, voice strong despite the fear he could see in her trembling fingers. Sam nodded, stepping back, keeping the rifle aimed but low. Naira moved to the threshold, pulling off her blindfold for the first time in days. Her eyes, a pale gray flecked with gold, opened wide to the night. She raised her voice, calm and clear. "You want me because you think I'm helpless, because you think I'm less, but I am not afraid of you. My father sold me. You let him. And now you come to take me again." The men outside shifted, discomforted. Sam caught one mutter, "She can see." Naira stood tall, staring into the darkness as if the night itself was hers. "I know your names, Deputy Grant, Sheriff Lawton. I know what you're afraid of. Not of me, of what it means if you are wrong." A heavy silence fell. The sheriff finally stepped closer, voice softening. "We just want to make things right, girl." "Then let me choose," Naira replied. "Let me stay. I will not run. I will not hide. I belong here." For a long moment, no one spoke. The wind howled. Sam felt his heart thundering in his chest, waiting for the click of a trigger or the final word that would break the standoff. At last, Deputy Grant lowered his rifle. "If she wants to stay, we got no law says otherwise." "Sheriff?" Lawton hesitated, then nodded. "If that's her choice, but the town won't let it go, Sam. You both need to be ready for what comes next." Sam nodded, never letting his eyes leave the men outside. "We always are." The sheriff and his deputy melted back into the night, their lanterns swinging. Sam slumped, relief and exhaustion crashing over him in equal measure. Naira slipped the blindfold back into her pocket, shoulders trembling, but she did not cry. He reached for her hand, steadying her. "You did that, Naira. You made them listen." She squeezed his hand, a faint, triumphant smile flickering at the corner of her lips. "I saw them, Sam. Saw who they really were. Sometimes you have to show them you're not what they expect." He nodded, pride and awe mingling in his chest. "You're braver than I ever was." They sat together by the dying fire, the first rays of dawn softening the world outside. For now, they had won a small victory. But as light crept across the hills, Sam knew the hardest part was still to come. The town's whispers, the old wounds, and the question of whether their fragile peace could truly last. Yet in that quiet, golden hour, with Naira at his side, Sam believed for the first time that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to see beyond the scars and shadows into a life where trust and love could finally take root. The days that followed brought a tense kind of calm, a lull heavy with expectation, as if even the land itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Word spread quickly through White Butte and beyond. Some folks called Sam a fool, others whispered he was dangerous. More than one rancher stopped visiting altogether. Sam hardly cared, but he noticed the change, the way the storekeeper watched him from behind the counter, how mail was left at the end of his lane instead of handed over, how the world seemed to draw a line between us and them. Naira, for her part, faced the scrutiny with quiet dignity. She moved through the days as if nothing had changed, tending the house, walking the garden, humming to herself as she swept the porch or fed the mule. She never complained, never asked questions about the future, but Sam saw how she stiffened when footsteps passed near the fence, how she flinched at sudden laughter drifting over the hill. One morning, a heavy knock rattled the door before sunrise. Sam answered, rifle in hand, to find a woman he barely knew, Mrs. Beckett, from the dry farm south of the arroyo. Her face was set and pale beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "You got the Apache girl here?" she demanded without greeting. Sam tensed but nodded. "She's here. Why?" Beckett's eyes darted to the window, then back. "My youngest, Lily, wandered off yesterday. We found her, but she said she saw your girl near the river. Lily's got a fever. She's talking nonsense, but the other mothers, and they're saying your girl cursed her. I don't believe it. But you know how talk spreads. You'd best keep her close, Mr. Clay. Some folks are stirring up trouble." She pressed a parcel of bread into Sam's hand, awkward contumacion but meant as a sign of peace, then hurried away before he could answer. Sam closed the door with a heaviness that felt like a warning. He told Naira about the visit. She listened, silent, her jaw set. "They fear what they do not know," she said at last. "It has always been so." Sam wanted to shield her, to shout down every cruel rumor, but he knew words did little to change frightened minds. Instead, he decided to bring her with him to town for supplies, despite the risk. "If folks are going to talk, let them see who you really are," he said. Naira hesitated, fingers clenching in her skirt. "Are you sure?" He offered his arm. "I won't let anything happen to you, not ever." The walk to White Butte was quiet. Birds called from the cottonwoods, and the sun warmed their backs. As they neared the edge of town, Naira's steps grew slower, more careful, but her chin remained high. Heads turned as they passed the saloon, the blacksmith's, the general store. Some men spat in the dust. A few women gathered their children close, eyes full of suspicion. At the store, Sam did the talking. Naira stood quietly by the door, hands folded, listening to every word, every footstep. When Mrs. Johnson, the shopkeeper's wife, brought out their flour and beans, she paused. "You're the girl," she said, voice uncertain. "The one who can't see." Naira turned her face to the woman, smiling softly. "Sometimes, not seeing is a blessing, Ma'am." Something in her tone, a blend of sorrow and humor, caught the woman off guard. Mrs. Johnson hesitated, then nodded and slipped an extra apple into the sack. "For luck?" she whispered. On the way home, Sam carried the groceries, heart pounding with pride and anxiety. He wanted to believe the worst had passed, but as they crested the last hill before the ranch, a stone crashed into the dirt near Naira's feet. Sam whirled, spotting two boys, sons of the mill owner, already running back toward town. Naira did not flinch. She bent down, picked up the stone, and set it on the fence post. "If you let a wound fester, it only grows," she said quietly. "But if you show them you are not afraid, they may think twice next time." Sam saw the resolve in her face and felt something fierce and protective rise inside him. "You're not alone, Naira. Not ever." That night, as they sat together in the fading lamplight, the quiet between them was different. Not heavy with fear, but woven with defiance and hope. The world outside might refuse to understand, but here in this small house at the edge of the desert, trust was growing, painful and slow, like roots in dry earth, but unbreakable all the same. Yet as Sam banked the fire and Naira drew her blanket close, a voice from the shadows echoed in his mind. Not everyone in White Butte would let go so easily. Tomorrow, the sun would rise on a world that still needed to be won. The following days took on a strange new rhythm, a pattern of ordinary chores shadowed by the constant presence of threat. Sam repaired fence posts, brought water from the creek, and spent hours watching the horizon for signs of trouble. Naira kept to the house and garden, her touch careful, her ears always tuned to the world beyond their fence. But each evening, as darkness settled and the rest of White Butte turned in on itself, a sense of quiet solidarity grew between them, deeper and more necessary with each passing day. One afternoon, as Sam split wood behind the barn, he heard Naira singing softly in Apache, the melody gentle but threaded with sorrow. He stopped, axe held mid-air, and listened. The song rose and fell in the breeze, words he could not understand, yet their meaning clear in the ache and resolve behind every note. It was a song of memory, a kind of prayer for those lost, and a stubborn promise to remain. Sam found her kneeling in the patch of wildflowers at the edge of the yard, hands buried in the earth. She looked up as he approached, a question in her eyes. "What are you planting?" he asked quietly. She brushed dirt from her palms and smiled. "Anything that will grow. My mother used to say, if you tend the ground with patience, it will give you back hope, even if it takes time." Sam knelt beside her, running his fingers through the cool soil. "You miss her," he said. Not as a question, but as a truth that lived between them. Naira nodded, eyes glimmering. "Every day, I wish she could see me now. Not just what's become of me, but what I'm learning to become." Sam reached for her hand, clumsy but sincere. "She'd be proud. I know it." They sat in the dirt, side by side, and for a moment the world shrank to nothing but the scent of earth, the buzz of bees, the two of them, and the quiet work of healing. But as the sun slid lower, a shadow fell across the garden. Sam looked up to see Boone riding up the lane, urgency written on his face. "Sam!" Boone called, dismounting with a grunt. "There's word from town." Group of men, stirred up by that Beckett woman and the mill hands. They're talking about driving the girl out, or worse. Sheriff can't hold them back if they come in numbers. Naira's face went pale, her lips pressed thin. Sam stood, jaw tight. "How many?" Boone shook his head. "Half the town, maybe more. They're coming tonight, after sundown. You need to be ready, son." Sam glanced at Naira, her hands fisted in her skirt. "We have nowhere to go, Boone. If we run, we look guilty. If we stay..." Boone cut him off, softer now. "I'll stand with you as long as I can, but the law won't reach out here in time. Best be ready for the worst." As Boone rode off, Sam felt a chill settle in his bones. He took Naira's hands in his, feeling the tremble she tried to hide. "Whatever happens, we face it together. I promise." That night, the house became a fortress. Sam shuttered the windows and blocked the doors, his rifle loaded and within reach. He taught Naira the quickest route to the root cellar, where she could hide if things went bad. She listened but refused to leave his side. As darkness thickened, lanterns appeared on the horizon, one, then three, then a cluster weaving slowly down the trail. Voices carried on the wind, angry and afraid. Sam's heart hammered, but Naira remained calm, her breath steady. She stood by the door, blindfold off, eyes open to the dark. "Do not be afraid for me, Sam. I have been alone in the world before. This time, I am not." The first shouts rang out from beyond the fence, calls for Sam to send her out, demands for justice, curses hurled at the girl they refused to know. Sam stepped onto the porch, rifle slung but barrel down. "She's under my roof," he called. "If you want her, you go through me. A stone sailed past and striking the doorframe. Sam didn't flinch, but Naira touched his shoulder, grounding him. "Let me speak." He hesitated, then nodded. Naira stepped forward, hands raised, voice steady and clear. "You fear me because you do not see me, but I see you. I see the pain and the anger that makes good people cruel. I am not your enemy. I am just a girl who wants to live." For a moment, the crowd quieted, caught off guard by her calm. Boone's voice rang out, strong and tired. "She's no witch, no curse, just a soul, same as the rest of us." But someone in the crowd shouted, "We want justice," and the spell broke. Feet stomped, voices rose, a fury ready to spill over. Sam took Naira's hand, steady as stone. "Whatever happens, I won't let go." Inside, the house pulsed with fear and hope, two hearts beating together in defiance. Outside, the night trembled, caught on the knife edge between mercy and violence, and as Naira closed her eyes, listening to the storm beyond the door, she whispered, I see you all." But would it be enough to save them both when dawn broke? The mob pressed closer as the darkness thickened, voices sharpening, anger gathering force like a storm cresting on the plains. Sam felt the porch boards tremble beneath his boots as the crowd fanned out across his yard, torches flickering, fists clenched. Someone pounded the gate, shaking it hard enough that the hinges groaned. Naira stood beside him, unflinching. Her eyes, wide and clear now without the blindfold, seemed almost luminous in the lamplight. Sam watched her, searching for a trace of fear, but found only a strange calm like the stillness before thunder. The sheriff's voice rang out from behind the crowd. "Sam Clay, let's not make this worse. Give her up and nobody gets hurt." Boone, standing near the steps, tried to reason with the men at the front. "This isn't justice. You're turning your backs on what's right." A stone crashed through a window. Glass rained onto the floor. Naira didn't flinch. Sam's grip tightened on his rifle, but he kept the barrel pointed down, determined not to start what he knew he couldn't finish. He raised his voice above the din. "She's not leaving this house. You want her? You come for me too." A surge rippled through the mob. Two men, Rory Beckett and Jim O'Donnell, both half drunk and full of bravado, started up the steps, faces twisted with fear and rage. Boone stepped between them and the door, arms out. "Back off! You want blood? You go through me first." Jim shoved Boone aside. Boone staggered but didn't fall, shouting, "Are you all blind? Can't you see what you're doing?" Naira touched Sam's arm, steadying him. Then, with a voice clear as spring water, she called out to the crowd, "You have been blinded by fear. You look at me and see only what you're told, but I see you, all of you. You think you can't be forgiven, so you choose to hate. But it will never make you whole." The words hung in the air, strange and powerful. For a heartbeat, the mob hesitated. Even Jim O'Donnell seemed uncertain, glancing back at the faces behind him. But then someone else shouted, "She bewitched my child. The sickness started when she came here." Others echoed it, voices blurring together, pain searching for somewhere to land. Sam stepped forward, his own fear replaced by a desperate clarity. "If you do this, you'll carry it forever. There's no peace at the end of violence. You know it as well as I do." From the back, the sheriff tried again. "Sam, please, don't force my hand. We don't want blood." Naira lifted her chin. "Then let me speak to the sick child. Let me prove there's nothing to fear." For a moment, the crowd wavered, skeptical, but unsure. Mrs. Beckett pushed to the front, clutching her daughter Lily, whose fevered eyes fluttered in her arms. Naira stepped forward, stopping only a pace away from the mob. Sam's heart hammered, but he let her go, trusting her courage. She knelt by Lily, her voice soft and kind. "May I?" Mrs. Beckett hesitated, then nodded, tears in her eyes. Naira placed her hand gently on Lily's forehead, whispering in Apache. The child's breathing slowed, her restless twitching stilled. A hush fell as everyone watched, hope and fear mingling in the torchlight. Lily blinked and turned toward Naira's voice. "It's not dark anymore," she murmured, her fever breaking in that very moment. Mrs. Beckett sobbed, clutching her child. The crowd recoiled, stunned into silence. Boone seized the moment, shouting, You see, she's no witch, no curse. Just a healer, a girl who has suffered and given more than any of us. Someone in the mob dropped their torch. Others murmured, turning away in shame and confusion. Even Jim and Rory stepped back, anger drained, replaced by uncertainty. The sheriff waded through the retreating crowd and stood before Naira. He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time saw not a threat, but a person, brave and gentle. "I was wrong," he said quietly, "about all of this." Naira nodded, her strength nearly spent. "We all see only what we wish. Tonight, you chose to look deeper." The mob dispersed, one cluster at a time, their hatred unraveling under the weight of what they'd witnessed. Boone rested a reassuring hand on Sam's shoulder. "You did good, son, both of you." Sam gathered Naira into his arms as the porch emptied and silence returned. His heart pounded with relief, pride, and an exhaustion that reached the bone. But as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Sam knew nothing in White Butte would ever be quite the same. The town had faced its darkness, and for the first time in years, hope felt possible. Yet in the quiet that followed, Sam wondered, had the danger truly passed? Or would the scars of fear and suspicion run deeper than any wound the night could bring? The sun rose over White Butte, painting the yard in gold and softening the wounds of the night before. The broken glass glinted on the porch, reminders of just how close they'd come to disaster. Sam swept it away as quietly as he could, his mind restless with questions about what would happen next. The town was quiet, the mob dispersed, but a tension lingered in the air like thunder threatening to return. Naira was slow to wake that morning. The ordeal had exhausted her. Her voice, when she finally greeted Sam, was rough with fatigue. Yet, she insisted on rising, tending to the garden as if the ordinary could mend the extraordinary. Sam watched her from the window, his chest tight with a mix of love and worry. Throughout the day, neighbors trickled by, not in anger this time, but out of uneasy curiosity. Boone arrived first, bringing fresh eggs and bread as a peace offering. "They'll talk for a while," he admitted. "Some are still scared, but you showed them what was real. That matters more than you know." Mrs. Beckett appeared next, holding Lily's hand. The child clung shyly to her skirts but smiled when she saw Naira. Mrs. Beckett pressed Sam's hands with both of hers. "Thank you for letting her help. She's the first to break her fever in days." Her eyes glistened with relief and something like apology. Sam felt the walls begin to soften, slowly, like the thaw after a long winter. He and Naira shared quiet moments in the yard, rebuilding what was broken, talking about things that had nothing to do with mobs or fear. She taught him words in Apache, laughing when he mangled the sounds, and he tried to teach her to whistle, though she could only manage a breathy tune. But the shadow of the night before lingered. The sheriff stopped by in the afternoon, hat in hand, his face serious. "You're safe for now," he told them. "But folks in town are divided. Some say it was a miracle, others still whisper about curses and secrets. There'll be another meeting at the church. I'll speak for you if it comes to that, but it's best if you both keep to the ranch a while." Sam nodded, understanding the fragility of their peace. After the sheriff left, he and Naira sat on the porch as the wind picked up, carrying distant voices and the scent of rain. "You're not afraid?" Sam asked, studying her profile in the twilight. Naira smiled, weary but unbowed. "I have lived with fear all my life, but now I am not alone in it. That makes all the difference." They sat in companionable silence, the kind that comes only after facing the worst together and surviving. For a while, the world felt simple, just the two of them, the whisper of the grass, the hopeful rhythm of a future neither dared imagine before. But as dusk fell, a rider approached from the west. It was an elder from Naira's people, dressed in faded buckskin, his hair streaked with silver. He dismounted, offering Naira a slow, respectful nod. "Word traveled fast," he said. "Some heard you were in trouble. Some came to help." He handed her a woven pouch. Inside, a sprig of wild sage, a stone carved with an old symbol, and a feather. Naira accepted them with trembling hands, emotion flickering in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered in Apache. The elder glanced at Sam. "You gave her shelter. That makes you kin in the old way. We will not forget." He departed as quickly as he had come, leaving a sense of belonging behind that neither Sam nor Naira had known for years. Night fell gently, with no voices on the wind, just the hush of the desert and the low crackle of the fire inside. Naira sat beside Sam, holding the pouch in her lap, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. Sam shook his head, his voice steady. "Never. I only wish I'd seen you sooner, really seen you." She smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "Sometimes it takes darkness to show us what matters. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find where we belong." He wrapped an arm around her, feeling for the first time in years a peace that was real, not just hoped for. But as the fire died down and they prepared for sleep, Sam caught a movement at the edge of the yard, a lone figure pausing in the moonlight. He tensed, but when he looked again, the space was empty. Still, his old fears lingered. Would the peace they'd built last, or would the world's suspicion return with the dawn? With Naira's head resting on his chest, Sam closed his eyes, ready to face whatever the next day would bring, together. In the following days, life settled into a fragile normalcy, a kind of after-the-storm calm that felt both earned and tentative. The gossip in town faded slowly, replaced by other worries as summer deepened and the drought returned to test every soul along the White Butte. Sam and Naira kept mostly to the ranch. There were still glances and mutters when they rode into town for supplies, but most folks turned away rather than confront what had already been decided by courage and kindness. Naira busied herself with the garden, coaxing green from the dusty soil, her laughter finally coming more easily. As the memory of that long, fearful night receded, she started to teach Sam little things: how to recognize bird calls at dawn, the difference between rain on cottonwood leaves and the hush before a real storm. He listened and watched her with a quiet reverence, often forgetting the first days when she seemed a mystery he'd never unravel. But not all was peace. Some wounds ran deeper than a single night's forgiveness, and not everyone was willing to let go. One afternoon, as Naira gathered herbs at the edge of the property, she froze, hearing voices in the trees. She called softly for Sam Chews, who came running, rifle ready. They found a group of young men from town, Rory Beckett among them, standing by the old fence, eyes hard with pride and uncertainty. "We're not here for trouble," Rory said, hands raised. "We just want to talk." Sam's jaw tightened, but Naira touched his arm, sensing his anger. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady. One of the boys, barely more than a child, shuffled his feet. "Folks are scared, miss. They don't know what to believe. My pa says, and he says you cursed his cattle, but I saw what you did for Lily. I saw her get better." Another spoke up. "My ma says it's time we move on, that there's enough hurt in this town already." Naira let her hands fall to her sides, her shoulders softening. "You do not have to fear me. I wish only to live, like any of you." There was a long, awkward silence. Then Rory nodded, swallowing hard. "If you need anything, wood, water, we'll bring it. If anyone comes out here looking for trouble, we'll warn you." Sam watched, hope flickering in his chest. "Thank you, boys. That means more than you know." They left as quietly as they had come, the tension broken, but not erased. Sam felt the air lighten as he watched Naira return to her plants, her smile small but genuine. "You changed something in them," he said. "You made them see." She shrugged, a glimmer of mischief in her eyes. "Sometimes it's easier to open your eyes when someone else has shown you the way." That evening, Boone arrived on horseback, his saddle creaking as he dismounted with a grunt. He joined them on the porch, sharing the latest news from town. "Sheriff stood up for you both at the meeting. Said White Butte is done with fear. Anyone wants to stir up trouble, he'll deal with them himself." Folks grumbled, but it was enough. "I reckon you're safe, at least as safe as anyone can be out here." Naira offered Boone a mug of sweetened coffee, and for a long while they sat together in companionable silence, watching the sun melt behind the hills. Boone finally rose, laying a rough hand on Sam's shoulder. "You did right, son. Don't ever doubt it." After Boone left, Sam and Naira lingered outside, the hush of dusk settling around them like a blessing. Naira leaned her head on Sam's shoulder, her voice barely more than a whisper. I think I was always meant to find this place. Maybe I was always meant to find you." Sam kissed her hair, the gesture simple but full of all the words he couldn't say. "You saved me too, Naira, in ways I didn't know I needed." They went inside as the first stars blinked awake. In the dark, Naira shed the last of her blindfolds, no longer a shield, but a relic of pain left behind. She folded it carefully, tucking it into a wooden box beside the bed. Before sleep, she said, "You ever wonder what comes next?" Sam thought for a long moment. "A new day, and I'll meet it with you, whatever it brings." And for the first time, neither of them lay awake waiting for footsteps in the dark. The world was still uncertain, the land still hard, but they had each other, and in that, they found enough peace to close their eyes and dream. Outside, the moon watched over White Butte, a silent witness to the truth that sometimes, when two people finally see each other for who they are, even the deepest scars begin to fade. It was just before dawn when Sam woke with a start, a tension in the air so sharp it felt like the earth itself was holding its breath. He reached for Naira, only to find her already up, sitting by the open window and listening to the distant sounds of the world waking. The sky was still black, but a thin line of gold pressed against the horizon, promising another day. Sam moved quietly to her side. "Couldn't sleep?" Naira shook her head, but there was peace in her face. "No bad dreams tonight, only questions I'm not afraid of anymore." He touched her hand, savoring the simple nearness. Together, they watched as light crept over the fields, the garden, the patched fence where so much had been risked and rebuilt. But peace is never absolute on the frontier. As the sun lifted, the distant thump of hooves echoed across the hard-packed earth. Sam tensed, every instinct on edge. But this time, he found himself reaching for Naira's hand instead of his rifle. From the trail, 3 riders appeared, Sheriff Lawton in front, Boone just behind, and a stranger riding a weary gray mare. The stranger's face was lined and weathered, Apache features unmistakable, his hair caught back with a faded red cloth. They stopped at the gate, the sheriff tipping his hat. "Morning, Sam." "Morning. Naira." "We come with news and with a guest." Boone stepped down, but the stranger stayed in the saddle, eyes resting on Naira with a deep, searching kindness. "You are called Naira." His English was slow, deliberate. Naira nodded, standing tall. "Yes, sir." The man dismounted, approaching with careful dignity. "My name is Chaska. Your mother was my kin. We searched for you, but the world is wide and hard. I came to see if you were safe, if you'd found a home." A trembling started in Naira's hands, but she met his gaze, tears glimmering. "I am safe," she said, her voice steady. "I have a home." Chaska nodded, his pride unmistakable. "I heard of what you did, how you stood your ground, how you spoke when others shouted. Our people do not forget courage, nor do we forget kindness, shown by those not of our blood." He turned to Sam, extending a hand. "You gave her shelter. Now you are kin too." Sam shook the man's hand, feeling the weight and warmth of that acceptance. For a moment, words failed him. The sheriff cleared his throat. "There's more," he said, glancing at the horizon where another horse and wagon approached. A government agent, pale and sharp-suited, with paperwork for Naira's legal guardianship. "He'll want your word, Naira. Your choice. Stay here, or go with Chaska and his people if you wish." The agent dismounted, laying out the terms with brisk efficiency. Naira listened to each word, standing between Sam and Chaska, her head high. When he finished, she did not hesitate. "I choose to stay," she said, voice ringing clear, "but I hope to visit my people. I hope to know both parts of who I am." The agent signed the papers, Boone and the sheriff witnessing with quiet pride. When it was done, Chaska offered Naira a beaded bracelet. Her mother's, he explained, kept safe for years. She slipped it onto her wrist, her fingers trembling with gratitude. "Will you visit us?" Chaska asked softly. "Yes," Naira promised, "and you are welcome here, always." With formalities done, the men took their leave, each one pausing to thank Sam and Naira for their courage. Boone lingered at the door, This isn't the end, you know. Hard things always find their way back out here. But you faced the worst and you found each other. As the sun climbed higher, Naira and Sam sat together on the porch, the bracelet warm against her skin, the papers clutched in Sam's hand like proof that what they'd fought for was real. The garden shimmered with early light. The fear and suspicion that had nearly broken them now lay behind, like a bad dream banished by the dawn. For the first time, Sam allowed himself to believe that what they'd built could last. Naira leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, and together they watched the land wake up, wild and scarred but beautiful. She whispered, "You see me, Sam. That's all I ever wanted." He squeezed her hand, tears stinging his eyes. "And you taught me how." In that moment, surrounded by the promise of morning, it no longer mattered what the town thought or what dangers the future might hold. They had seen each other, and in that seeing, both of them were finally, irreversibly free. But as the wind rustled through the cottonwoods and birds called from the edge of the field, Sam knew a new story was beginning, a story built on trust, truth, and the kind of love that no longer needs to hide. Summer ripened into autumn at White Butte, bringing golden light across the fields and a gentle hush that settled around Sam's ranch. The echoes of that violent night faded slowly, but never vanished. The scars, on windowsills, on the earth, on their hearts, remained as reminders of what they'd endured and what it meant to truly belong. Naira tended the garden each morning, her hands coaxing life from stubborn soil. She wore her mother's beaded bracelet every day, the tiny stones warming beneath the sun. When the air cooled and the first leaves began to drift, Sam found himself marveling at the quiet rituals that now defined their life. Shared breakfasts, laughter at his clumsy attempts to learn Apache, evenings spent listening to Naira's stories beneath the wide, starlit sky. Word of what had happened at Sam's ranch traveled far beyond White Butte. Some of the townsfolk came to see for themselves, drawn by curiosity or a need to set old things right. Mrs. Beckett brought her daughter Lily often, staying longer with each visit, finding reasons to linger over coffee. Others arrived with small gifts, an extra loaf of bread, a spool of thread, a basket of apples, as if making offerings to peace itself. Gradually, suspicion gave way to acceptance, or at least to a polite, wary respect. One crisp morning, Chaska returned. He brought with him 2 other Apache elders and news from the northern camps. They sat on the porch with Sam and Naira, sharing food and stories, laughter and memories of those lost. Chaska taught Sam to carve a whistle from river willow, while the elders showed Naira the healing songs her mother once sang. There was grief in these gatherings, but also healing, a way to make peace with the past and claim the right to a future neither had dared hope for. Sam built a new fence, straight and strong, marking the edge of his land. He invited neighbors to help, and they came. Boone, the Beckett boys, even Rory O'Donnell, whose anger had once threatened everything. As they worked side by side, boundaries shifted slowly but for good. In the evenings, Sam and Naira would walk along the edge of the fields, the sun painting the world in gold and lavender. Naira would pause, eyes closed, listening to the wind in the grass, the rush of wings overhead. Sometimes she would take Sam's hand and guide him, not by sight, but by feeling, showing him the hidden paths she had learned by heart. One night, as the first frost shimmered on the ground, Sam asked, "Do you ever wish things had been different? That life had brought you somewhere else?" Naira smiled, her eyes shining. "No. Everything before brought me here. I wouldn't trade it. Not the darkness, not the pain, not if it meant losing you." Sam drew her close, heart full and easy for the first time in years. "I used to think I was cursed to wander alone," he said quietly. "But you taught me to stop running, to open my eyes, to stay." As autumn deepened, Naira received a letter carried by Chaska from her relatives in the north. They asked her to visit for the winter ceremonies, promising welcome and kinship. She and Sam spent long evenings preparing, packing gifts and food, practicing her mother's language. When the day came, Sam rode with her as far as the river, watching as she crossed to the waiting elders, her head held high, the past and future converging in each step. Sam returned to the ranch, tending to chores and awaiting her return, trusting in what they'd built. When Naira finally came home, her arms full of wildflowers, her eyes bright with stories, the house felt complete, as if every hardship had been the price of finding one another. And so, in that humble ranch at the edge of White Butte, a new kind of family was born, not of blood, but of shared truth and chosen love. Sam and Naira faced the world together, still wary, still scarred, but no longer alone. If this story moved your heart, if you found hope in the courage it takes to see and be seen, we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to our channel for more tales of resilience, compassion, and unlikely love. Stories where scars are not just wounds, but proof of having survived. And if you believe, as we do, that everyone deserves a second chance at belonging, share this story with someone who needs it. There are more journeys to come, more sunrises over wildland, more lives waiting to be changed by kindness and courage. Don't miss the next tale. Tap the bell and ride with us again where hope takes root, even in the harshest places. Until then, remember, what you choose to see can change everything.